Hey everyone, what's up? I'm Priyanka from Let's Talk College, and in this video we are going to talk about what not to do on your college essay. Now, these are just a couple of mistakes that I've noticed over the years that my students initially tend to make, and I wanted to make sure that you can avoid all of them. So, mistake number one, don't be general, don't be vague. So, definition. There are times when students will make statements like, oh, my mom is a very kind and generous person and I want to be more like her. I really admire her. And that in its own as a sentiment is wonderful. I mean, it's great that your mom is the way she is, and it's so great that you want to be like her. But keep in mind that no one else knows your mom and no one else knows you, or at least the reader, I should say. The reader, the admissions officer, does not know you or your mom. And that means we want to know more about the story behind your basically epiphany of that your mom was an awesome person, basically. So if you realize that your mom is amazing, great. Tell us the moment you realized that. What was it, one event? Maybe it was an event outside the house, so you were working at a homeless shelter, volunteering at a homeless shelter, maybe it was a donation event, whatever it might have been. Put us in that moment and tell us that story, describe it, and then tell us why is it that you want to be like this person that you're referring to. That's one idea of a general statement. Other ideas include maybe I'm really interested in the environment or I'm interested in building. Great. What do you mean by that? I have zero idea what that means. What about the environment? How did you get interested in the environment? Or how did you get interested into building, creating, or designing your own PC? Whatever it might be. How did you get into it? Tell us a little more about the background story. Don't just give us this one statement of, well, I did this and bam, that happened. So with that said, point number two. So don't mention any mental health or physical health concerns. Meaning, it's sort of a sensitive topic, and you shouldn't leave the reader feeling awkward or in any way in pity of you, basically pitying you. Instead, there is a separate section at the end of your application or at the end of underneath the writing section, which is called additional information. Now, this section is approximately 650 words, and that is when you, in a matter-of-fact manner, simply write down, here was the incident, here's what happened, here's how it was dealt with, or we are currently still dealing with, and then here was the resolution, or here's where we're at, basically. Now, I get it, I have had students, and I have students right now who may have had an ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, in terms of mental health concerns, and then physical health, they have had concussions, they've been out of school, all of which have impacted their grades and GPAs at some point because either they were out of school or in cases of mental health, they've just not been diagnosed, so therefore no one knew that someone needed to be medicated for something in some way, shape, or form. So in no way, I'm not saying don't mention it at all. In fact, you should mention it. This is a very big part of your journey, but just don't mention it in your personal statement. All right, so with that said, point number three, which is don't use cliches. And cliches, I'm going to categorize into two different sections. So first one, we have cultural cliches, and those will be things like, well, the fact, let's say that I'm Indian and I may have been part of a math club. Well, that's kind of a cliche, that's an expected stereotype that exists with Indian people. I mean, and I was in a math club, but if I didn't do anything that was meaningful to me in that organization, then there's no reason to just mention it, to have it in there. Basically, if it meant something to you, then go ahead and write it, the story, share it, tell us the background and the experience and what happened and how it shaped you, whatever it might be. But don't simply write things just to write things and fill that space or that word count. Similarly, another idea would be another cliche topic would be if you're, let's say, a recruited athlete or you're trying to be recruited for a university. Well, at that point, you have a coach that's coming to see your meets or your practices. So you have someone already talking about you in that specific category, meaning if you're getting, let's say, recruited for soccer, or you'd like to be recruited for soccer, and this coach is already batting for you to the admissions team. Don't mention soccer in your personal statement again. Your folder is already labeled potential soccer recruit. We know that's the one thing they definitely know about you. So share something different. Do you draw? Let's say draw and paint. Do you play an instrument? Have you worked somewhere and that impacted you? Have you volunteered somewhere and that was just a different experience because you maybe saw something that the theory you knew but in practice played out differently? Whatever it might be. share another aspect of you that's not just the one aspect people know about. Same idea goes for anyone who's applying into the arts, right? Yes, there's going to be a portfolio you have to submit work, and I'm not saying you can't absolutely write about your work and what you do, but there's already going to be a package for your art or your creativity that's going to be submitted. So yes, you can mention that in 2 to 3 lines or maybe in a paragraph into your personal statement, but then tell us something else about you. Where do you get your style from? What is it that, again, work experience may have happened, something that wasn't just obvious from the information we already have about you. So moving on to the next point, do not list your activities in your resume in word form. So I've had students who simply will try and squeeze in as much as possible from their activity section into their personal statement, and it basically sounds like a run-on list. We don't want that. Going back to the previous point, this activity was already mentioned, or these activities are already mentioned. Why are you telling me about them again and only telling me the basics, right? So I'm not saying you can't expand upon your activities, but again, something that was genuinely meaningful, not something that you did because it looked good for college. After that, sensitive or divisive topics, and these are, you already know what they are. Stay away from the huge ones like right now, wearing a mask, to wear or not to wear a mask. That is unfortunately a topic that is actually divisive or sensitive, and it doesn't make sense, but I had a student who wanted to write his essay, or who wanted to start his essay on the fact that why is it that people don't wear masks and what was the psychology behind it, because he was simply trying to say, I'm interested in psychology. I'm interested in the way the human mind works. But this was the example that he used. Now, unfortunately, this is somewhat of a controversial topic based on what state you live in, what universities and group of universities you're looking at, and all of that. So don't mention anything that could potentially piss off the person who's reading this essay. You don't know whose hands your essay, your application is going to land in. You don't know this person's background. You don't know anything about this reader, okay? So that's just as a safe bet, just stay away from anything that causes conflict. All right, so with that said, point number 6, don't just write about who you admire. Explanation. Students tend to write paragraphs upon paragraphs about, and sometimes even entire essays on this one individual or 2 individuals that they admire. Great, I'm glad you have someone that you admire who's setting a great example for you, but they're not the ones trying to get into college. You are. This essay should be about you. So yes, you can mention who you admire, whether that may have been a parent, whether that was a grandparent, family friend, coach, whoever it might be. But limit that to approximately 3 to 4 sentences of them so that you can provide their background and everything like that. But then don't go more than that. Transition out of that and bring it back to you again, that these are the traits you've learned because of this individual, and here's what you hope to accomplish because of what you've learned, and so forth. So just be careful with that, because there are times when students will write paragraphs of their college essays on just this other individual. And again, you want to be best friends, or you want to get to know this other person, but I know nothing about you. All right, so just something to watch out for. Then point number 7, don't be braggy. This has come up, but you don't want to sound arrogant. You want to make sure that your tone is considerate and it's humble. Give credit where it's due. So if you are part of a club, don't just say I did something, make sure you say we did something. And if you've led it, great, then that's something you may point out, but simply it was a team effort. You didn't do something on your own. So if that's the case, make sure you give credit exactly where it's due. And finally, don't make shit up. I have had students who try and do that, and they'll say, yeah, no, I never actually learned that on this trip. I just made it up because to sound good. Great? I mean, why? So overall, by the fact that you've even been alive for 17 to 18 years, you have a story to tell. Any story is something. It seems like you don't. It seems like you've led this really boring life because you just went to school, did your sport, maybe your job, community service, whatever it might be, you've done the basics. But remember, you were learning at every stage. You just didn't realize it. For example, when you went to work, did you learn the dynamics of a workplace? Did you learn how to basically speak to a boss, how to speak to clients or customers that come into your, let's say, ice cream shop or whatever it might be? If you're a, let's say, daycare worker or a camp counselor, well, did you learn responsibility? Did you learn how to gain control of a room and ensure that whatever rules you set were actually enforced? How did you go about doing that, right? So we all have experiences at that age. Because by default, by being alive, by interacting, every interaction that you have has been a learning experience, whether you consciously realize it or not. Now you just have to sit down and actually ask yourself, let me look at my activities again and think about what it is that I've learned from them. Or let me look at my family members and think about exactly what it is, what traits, what values have I learned from them. Let me look at everyone around me and simply, and whether that's something you saw on the internet and you realized, oh wow, this is what's going on with the environment. Great. Talk about how you got into that. Because if so, again, by existing, we have different interests that we want to pursue. Or just find out more about. It doesn't even have to be a full career, just something that you discovered as something you like. Just talk about that. So with that said, we have our 8 major common mistakes that I've seen on college applications, college essays. And in the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about what you can do for your college essay. But for now, I've included the examples from Johns Hopkins in the description below. Now, the best part about these essays from Johns Hopkins, they also include feedback from the admissions committee. So even if you don't think an essay is good or whether it's amazing, check out what the admissions committee actually thinks from it, because you'd be surprised as to what you might think about the essay and then what they take away from it. So that's just one of the resources that's available. And so with that said, I hope this video was very helpful. If you do like what you heard and want to continue receiving more updates on the college application process, please feel free to subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the entire process on its own, please post in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!